Our guest today is Kartik Taneja, the Executive Vice President and Head of Payment and Consumer Lending at Mashreq, as well as the Chairman of NeoPay. As a leader in digital transformation, he specializes in driving growth and innovation across payments and other consumer businesses. Kartik is extremely curious and enjoys taking calculated risks, experimenting to understand what motivates people, and identifying the moments when the light bulb goes off. Thank you so much for being part of our show. I'm so excited. Your topic is very interesting. But first, I'd love to know about you. Can you tell us a bit more about you and your role in Mashreq?
Thank you. It is such a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure is mine.
My name is Kartik. I lead the payments and consumer lending business at Mashreq. So it sounds like, something very boring.
Not
So
at
let
all.
me try to break it up for you. What do I actually do, right? So anytime you're moving money from point A to point B, whether you're paying a friend or whether paying for something you bought, that's something that we look at, or whether you're withdrawing money from an ATM. And anytime you want to buy a car and you need a car loan, or if you're using your credit card, those are the kind of things that
Okay.
my team does.
Lovely. The episode's theme today is the evolution of payment. So, payment has changed a lot in the last couple of years. So many different systems, but people don't notice it. Like we were talking earlier, it only gets noticed when something goes wrong. So, can you please talk to us about the evolution of payment?
So payments have been there since pretty much civilization started. So you needed a way to make sure that there could be some trading happening. I know there was one civilization where they took care of it without needing to invent money by keeping ledgers and ledgers of what people owed each other.
Interesting.
Very complicated. In cuneiform, it was stored. But other than that, most civilizations found some way of, facilitating that barter or facilitating that trade to happen. And whether it's the cowrie shells that they're quoted everywhere and anywhere as the first unit of exchange, to funnily paper money, which came in fashion, went out of fashion many times. I believe the oldest reference of that is the Tang dynasty in the 7th century.
Wow, that
which,
old, that early.
yeah, no, but it came in and went out. Every time there was a powerful ruler, and they kind of enforced that. And when they died, it sort of also disappeared. But payments being part of commerce is, or trade
the
is
dawn.
what humans do,
Yeah.
and this facilitates trade. So it's a very important part of civilization. It's also like the most invisible part of civilization. Let me explain what I mean when I say it's invisible. So let's say you want to buy something at noon.com, which happens to be a partner of ours. So you go and you buy something. So when you put in your card number, do you know what happens after that?
A fairy takes my numbers and it goes to Noon and it tells Noon, this girl was so good, give her the dress she wants.
Something like
I mean,
that,
ideally,
but
that's
slightly more complicated. So
slightly less romantic.
So Noon would actually look at the card number that you entered, and they would send it to Visa. So let's say they are based in the UAE, they would send it to Visa. Visa would send it to their server, which is sitting in the United States. They would say, oh, this is a card issued by Mashreq Bank, and then they would send it to their directory server. Basically, a directory
Wow.
server will say, okay, how do I know it's you, right? So this doesn't go to Mashreq yet. It goes to a third entity, which is somewhere else in the world. Let's say it's in the UK. And then they will send an OTP. So the OTP, when you enter it, it basically says, okay, I authenticate that it's me.
Yeah.
Then it goes to the Mashreq server, and Mashreq says, yeah, we know this person. She's good. And
She's good for the money. She's got the money. Yeah.
and we say, yes, approved. And then it follows the entire route back halfway across the world and comes back. And then you say, okay, approved. Right? So you can see that within the few seconds that you're doing it, that signal has traveled probably the entire circumference
Incredible.
of the entire world in, let's say, milliseconds.
And we complain when it's longer than a few seconds.
Yeah, and that's how we've made it, right? So we want to make it invisible. We want to make sure that it works every time. And that's why you notice it when it doesn't
When it
work.
goes wrong. Yeah, I didn't realize it. I knew there was a few steps. I didn't realize it was this nuanced. I just thought that they just check your credit and that's it. But there's so many other aspects of it, and that's why
This is the less complicated version.
this is the ladies and gentlemen. This is the simpler version of what happens. No fairies. I was disappointed. We live in a digital era. It's undeniable.
Yeah.
And of course, since we are in a digital era, payment has become digital. So can you please talk to us a little bit about that specific change in payment?
See, card payments are always seen as a way of digitizing payments. So ATMs came on the scene about, let's say, 42, 43 years ago. And that was the start of, transacting through a digital communication channel. Cards was invented maybe slightly earlier, but they were quite niche. So there are three distinct sort of eras that have that you can divide recent history into, right? So the first one I would say is from 2005, and that was the introduction of the contactless payment, right? So a lot of people don't realize, but contactless payments only were launched in 2005, not earlier than that. And it took them almost 10 years to become mainstream or everyday.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that long ago.
Yeah, and today, for example, we take it for granted. So 90% of face-to-face or anywhere where you have a physical interface, payments are happening through tap, right? The second era was the era of wallets. Now, the wallets came into play only around 2014, 2015, around that time.
You mean the phone wallet, like the digital wallet?
That's right.
Okay.
What we call digital wallet now is like basically, I would call it OEM because it's all the equipment manufacturers who've been pushing that, right? So these are methods of making that payment. So these came in, and these also have taken off. So from, let's say, 5 years ago, it used to be put together, 0.5% of the total spending used to be on these wallets, to now more than 30%.
I think COVID had a big role on that as well. Not wanting to have cash, and right, it boosted it, I think, more, made people trust it a little bit more.
Very much so. So it was also convenient. It is seen as much more secure. It is much more secure. So it also took off, right? And the third era is sort of, I think, nascent. And I think that's the era which we are talking about, where you will have some form of cryptocurrency or some kind of, digital currency, which will come into play. Are we there? I think we are in a very, very early stage on that. And I think that era is starting.
Crypto makes me feel like a grandma. I don't get crypto, but it's definitely one of the new eras. Out of the three, what do you think has been the most significant, or the one that has had the bigger change in payment habits out of the three?
I would say all three have. And I think it's not, maybe it's something that is not visible to everyone, but transactions are already starting to happen in whether it's CBDCs, which is, central bank issued digital currencies, or whether it's, stable coins. Stable coins are basically digital currencies which are backed by actual physical currency. So, for example, an example of that would be a USDT, or Tether it's called, which is actually,
what?
It's called Tether.
Okay.
And it's actually backed by US dollars.
So
it's issued by a corporation.
It's paired to it? Like it's...
So one Tether would be like $1, right? And there are many others. So I'm just giving you an example.
Okay.
And it's supposed to be backed, each Tether dollar is supposed to be backed by a physical dollar in a bank account. So things are already happening. But if you say right now, if I were to take a snapshot and say what made the biggest difference, it would be actually contactless payments.
I think I would say as well. Because I think it's when people started to trust a means to pay that isn't tangible,
and it's meaningfully more convenient to use.
Yes.
Than actually putting a card, putting in a PIN, and so on.
It saved me so many times when I forgot my wallet, or when I'm stuck, or something happens. It has saved me a lot. But speaking of trust, there's a big question about trust and security and safety, because the more complicated and the more elements come in, the more things can go wrong, and the more things can get corrupted, and the more things can be taken advantage of. So can you please tell us more about what steps Mashreq is taking to help protect this new era in, I would say smart payment, because it's just, there's so many elements of it. What are they doing to ease people's concerns and secure this new method of payment?
So Mashreq has always been seen as an innovator in technology.
Absolutely.
And whether it's introducing new forms of payment, so for example, we were the first to bring an ATM into the market. We were the first to bring in these payment methods like digital wallets into the market, bring in Alipay or UPI and things like that. But equally, we've been investing into the security aspect. So whether it's adherence with 3D Secure second version, or the newest form of authentication that we are about to launch, which we are investing a lot of money on, is making sure that we are no longer relying on OTPs or one-time pins that you get on your phone, because they are, we feel or we see in data that that's probably the weak point today.
Yeah.
And we want to replace that with a far more secure way of authenticating. So you'll see that happening in the background much more. And wherever we need to authenticate you, we would use a biometric form of authentication. So that's where the world is moving to, and that's where we are going to be amongst the first to move to that in this market.
I'm so glad you mentioned biometrics, because I think it's the most recent evolution of authentication, biometrics, right? I think it's the most advanced one that we've reached. It's not on everything, but it's out there. So I would love to know, what's the future of payment like? In your opinion, if you could predict, what do you think would be the future of payment? Or how do you see it advancing in the next coming years? Because it's one of the most evolved day-to-day activities. We just don't notice it again because it's so smooth. Thanks to you, it's smooth. But how do you see it in the next couple of years?
Sure. Can I be cheeky and say that actually biometrics is also the oldest form of payment? Because,
really? Because, your thumb, yeah?
Right?
Yeah.
So thumbprints were one of the earliest ways of authenticating.
And then
that
it came
it's
out
yourself.
of fashion, didn't it?
Yes.
It went out of fashion for a while.
It became signatures. And now we are back to the thumb or some form
face.
of that. So we are trying out, I think you're alluding to that I think everything today is very phone-centric, right? So
True.
it requires you to rely on a device. And since, I'm looking at my crystal ball, I will say maybe the future is going to be device-free, right? Where you don't need a device to make a payment. And, some people say implants. I would say, why do you need an implant when there are so many unique things about you? Maybe DNA is the way to go. Retinas is the way to go. DNA, thumbprints, back to that. Some way to make payments would be probably the next wave of how we will pay.
Interesting.
Some form of that is being tested out. We ourselves are testing out, for example, pay by face with in fact, the government of Dubai. So you can enter, hopefully when it's live, you should be able to enter a museum, for example, by just smiling at the terminal. And there's also pay by palm that we are going to test out shortly after that. So these are still, I would say, experiments, but it's clear that the movement is towards device agnostic or device free.
Yeah, that's so interesting. You reminded me of the first time I went into the smart tunnel in the airport. It was surreal. I got in my boarding pass that says smart tunnel.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what's this? And they're like, oh, you just have to walk through the tunnel, and when it's green, you're done. I was like, wow, this is where we're at now.
Yeah.
So you can imagine where we are, where we'll be in the next couple of years. Speaking of the future, one of the most important user is the young generation. And they're one of the first adapters of the new, anything new, they adapt faster.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what is Mashreq doing to, kind of win them over or have more of a youthful interest in banking or in saving? Because they're a bit of a difficult market. But they're also a great market to have. So what do you think Mashreq is doing to help that?
So as you know, Mashreq is very digital, and Neo is the brand that we have of our
Neo.
Digital bank. Neo.
Interesting. Tell us about that.
So within Neo, we have a program called Neo Next, and that's for the younger generation, that is for children as young as 8 years old. Because our belief is that kids today need to know how to use financial products, at least the appropriate ones.
Yeah.
And also, they shouldn't be over shielded from these things so that they will find it difficult to navigate the world when they're older. And the way NeoNext is envisioned, it's not just a payment tool. It's actually a program which allows parents to have control over how much they're spending. They have visibility over where they're spending, and it allows them something that kids may not like, to put tasks, for example, saying if you make your bed for 7 days, you'll get
It's a
a
teaching
reward.
tool. I think it's a tool to help, I mean, to teach children early or to indoctrinate the idea of budgeting and being responsible, because it's something that a lot of people, a lot of new generation children, even me when I was growing up, we don't think about it.
Yeah.
We're a bit shielded by it, which makes us, like me, very, very bad at finance.
Yeah.
I got better, but I was very bad.
Yeah, and I feel that, children should be given those tools early. Yes, of course, appropriateness being the filter around
top,
it. And different parents may feel differently about it. But in general, I think some level of financial literacy at relatively young ages is beneficial. And NeoNext is one of the programs that allows parents that tool to be able to do that.
Speaking of financial literacy, asking for a friend, what's the best advice you can give for someone who wants to be more financially, literate and aware? What's the best advice you can give to improve or a habit or something that you think people should pay more attention to?
I think there are many tools available online. I know there are many fintechs which are coming into this space. The government of the UAE is coming out with a program with open banking, where we'll see much more of these things where people can aggregate how much you have, how much you owe across different banks, across different financial providers, and make better decisions about your life. But if you look at, I want to call out my friend Amreen, who runs Yabi, for example, who's doing some amazing work in this area. But also, if you look at central banks in territories like Australia or Singapore, they have set up dedicated programs with dedicated websites and outreach where it's really hard. So I'm going to detour and say it's really hard to give specific advice to a person because we don't know what your specific situation is. But in general, what is good advice? I think there are many sources today, far more than what they were even, let's say, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And we are definitely a bank which is participating and will continue to participate in programs like this. In general, I think these tend to be best served when they are run by an entity like a central bank, because then there's trust.
Yeah. There's trust, and then the person learning has a place to exercise what they're learning, right? You're not just learning and then in theory. No, you go to the bank and you have someone that's advising you.
Yeah.
Yeah. My friend who I asked this question to would really appreciate this advice. Thank you.
Lovely to hear.
There are so many interesting things in the horizon in this domain. What's something that has happened recently that you'd like to share with us?
Sure. So Mashreq is always listening to clients. And one of the needs that our clients are telling us is, how can we send our money faster and more efficiently to, let's say, people who are living in the Philippines or people who are living in Singapore. I myself moved from Singapore, so I know the pain of waiting for 2-3 days where you don't know where the money is and you sent it and you're waiting for it to hit the account in the other market. So interestingly, what we did was we tied up with a bank called DBS, which is based in Singapore. And through DBS, we have expanded the number of markets where, through our program called Quick Remit, our clients, Mashreq clients, can now send money to markets in the Far East, such as Singapore or such as China and a few others, and receive it instantly into their account. So I'll give you an example. I sent money to my account in Singapore, and before I got the confirmation from Mashreq Bank, I got a confirmation from my Singapore bank saying the money is already there.
That's amazing how fast the turnover is for that.
Yeah, and that's something that is a clear need that people have. And as our client base becomes more diverse, so we have 40 corridors right now, and we are actively looking to expand that and make sure that all our clients get covered efficiently and they can send money instantly anywhere across the world.
For the sake of comparison, how long did it take before the step? Just for the sake of comparison.
It was reasonably quick, but it was unpredictable. So it could get there in, let's say, an hour or even half an hour at best, but it was unpredictable because sometimes it could take a couple of days.
Okay.
And that's the point of time where, as a client, you don't know where is the money, right? And that thing is in the back of your head. So you're trying to basically reduce that period of time where you are, worried whether the money reached or something happened to it along the way.
Yeah.
And you're saying, okay, it's there.
Interesting. My last question to you is, if I can give you the chance to create, write, or produce or fix any of the problems that you see in payment now, what would you change? What would be that magical thing that you would change that you think would be the new evolution in payment for the next generation?
Well, I think the area is really about atomic payments. And like you said, the youth, I think that's where the next evolution has to be. Because if you see today, at least my children, when they were a bit younger, they used to be on Roblox, for example, all the time. And Robux has to be bought. And you're going to a world which is going into micro and atomic transactions for small things in-game when we live our life virtually, right? And there has to be a more efficient way of making sure that those payments happen, that they can be authorized by minors, for example. But you need to know as a parent what they're doing, what they're spending it on. And I think that area per se gets solved to a large extent by cryptocurrencies or distributed currencies.
Interesting. Crypto scares me, but I think there's like everything in the beginning, you get scared a little bit from it, but it has a lot of potential. Absolutely. You just have to be a little bit braver, because I'm not when it comes to these things.
No, yeah. I think we are still looking at the first generation of these payments.
Exactly.
As they mature and as, you're also more comfortable and regulators are comfortable and, everybody's more comfortable about using it, I think it will just take off.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. You've made such a mundane, typical, normal act like paying so interesting and so insightful that it really makes me think about the amount of detail and the nuance that goes into it. And that's something that I love when I meet my guests. So thank you so much for that. And I'm sure our listeners will find it fascinating.
Pleasure to be here.
Pleasure is mine.